What's good people? I am Artis Wright, the host of Choice Words, a podcast where we bring together educators and leaders across this country to discuss the different school choice options that we have. We specifically try to focus on the rise in school leadership with people of color, mothers, and educators that we often don't get to hear from on a national scale. And so I am super excited today to have Mr. Dominique Lee join us. Dominique Lee is a teacher turned school leader who saw beyond the classroom and decided to create wraparound services within our schools. And I think it's important to note that education doesn't stop when the last bell rings. In fact, schools are anchors for our communities in a lot of ways. And so I'm really excited to talk with Dominique today to get a sense of why he chose the route and the path that he chose, and just to talk more about the success that he's seen with his schools. And also just to get a little bit more insight into why teaching. Teaching profession as a whole often sometimes gets a bad rep. And specifically when we talk about the fact that teachers have to do so much beyond the classroom. But Dominique Lee has found a way to master that. Be ready to take notes because this brother's done amazing work, and it's just truth to power about when you're really passionate about something. The success is just abound. So, Dominique, I'm so glad to have you join us today. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thank you, Jay, for the opportunity.
Yeah, and so Dominique and I actually go really far back, and it's really funny. I spent I spent 14 years in Newark, New Jersey, and I first met you. I think you were a couple of years into teaching, if I'm not mistaken, or
I
I
think
don't know.
I think we had just started Brick, maybe 2 years in. I think it's when we met in our trials and tribulations of Newark reform.
Yes, indeed, and we have had many, and you've seen them firsthand. But you know what though, it's like I feel like I'm talking with family right now. There's so much about when you go through trauma, you know what I mean, and
Yes,
it brings you closer.
trauma.
So
Yes, that's a great
that's a
word.
great word to describe, right? But yeah, so let's just dive right in. First thing I want to ask, I've known you for so many years, but I've never really heard your background story. Like, why teaching? Why did you choose the teaching profession?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll keep it short and sweet. My parents had me they were teenage parents, 15 to 16. And unfortunately, I've felt the sting of growing up in a situation where your mother is trying to just make ends meet. So I experienced, the trials and tribulations that come growing up in poverty. Um, Loved every single day, saw hardworking people, but, just didn't have enough funds to make ends meet every single month. At the same time, my dad's side of the family, I'm actually third generation go to college on my dad's side of the family, and I have experienced a different lifestyle of upper middle class. So from an early age, I saw through the lenses of my two families, so two different sides of the train tracks per se, what it means to have education, the difference that allows for a person to maneuver through this world. Still have the trials and tribulations of being black in America, but it was easier for my dad and my grandmother and that side of family to maneuver through this world with college degrees and great jobs than my mom's side of the family. And so, from an early age, experiencing those two different sides of the world, I knew that I wanted to kind of give back in a way that allowed for more people like me to be able to um, not experience those trials and tribulations of growing up with a child in a situation where you don't have all the resources in front of you. And at the same time, many of my cousins, unfortunately, were not able to have access to resources. And so, by the grace of God, my father was able to pay for my education with my stepmother. They poured into myself and my sister, which allowed me to be in a position to have no obligations when I graduated from college. And so when I graduated, my dad and my grandmother and majority of my family basically encouraged me to just follow my passion. So that's kind of how I ended up in education. Was simply how can I create opportunities that will allow for children to have prosperous lives by using this piece of paper called a degree. So that's kind of how I up in this field.
And I love what you said about being able to pursue your passion, because the reality is a lot of teachers don't get paid what they deserve, and we've had major challenges with trying to increase teacher pay. I don't know why it's such a hard issue,
Yeah,
because literally it's just like, I mean, it makes it make
it
it make
makes
sense.
no sense.
Right,
No
it doesn't, right?
sense.
It doesn't at all. And to that, not only did you get involved and become and very passionate about teaching, but you went into the fire. Like, you started teaching in Newark Public Schools, of all places. Um, and for those of you who don't know Newark Public Schools, I think, is the third largest school district in the country. um, has what about, I can't remember because it's been so long. Lord help me out here. Very large population, inner city population primarily, very mixed culturally, but historically has had a really bad reputation, and specifically before the Zuckerberg funding came in. What was that,
Yes.
like 2010 or whatever? And then
Yeah.
there's a whole tea that we could talk about that. In fact, I think you were actually in the book, The Prize, that was
Yes,
written
I
about that
was.
funding.
Yes, I
Um,
was.
yeah, yeah, I was right there with you, man. I know what it was like. They should have the Prize Part 2 come out soon. I do want to ask you though, like, so what did you see in the classroom that made you say something has to change?
Yeah, I similar to many urban and rural environments, when you have an ecosystem that is not designed to support families holistically, you have situations that arise in school districts that, sometimes it is because of bad management, but sometimes it's just because of the system that we have created as a society. In Newark at that point in time, it was a mixture between there was some decisions that were not in the best interest of children, but in the same token, there was a system in place that people designed. We can say who designed those in a different conversation, but let's just say there was a system in place that did not allow for the district to live to its full potential, such as, people can't afford where they live, they don't have jobs, you have redlined them, the list goes on. And so when I entered Newark Public Schools, it was pre reform. It was also kind of during the phase where the state had taken over the district. And at that point in time, there was, admittedly, they kind of put the good kids in certain magnet schools and the other kids that were bad, they put over here, right? So I went to Shabazz High School, which was a comprehensive high school with about 2,000 kids. And unfortunately, the district did not put energy into our school. So the teachers who were not able to be productive teachers in other parts of our community were shipped over to Shabazz. And I personally witnessed this. This is not hearsay. I personally witnessed three teachers in my first year who were reassigned because the other parts of our community did not want them. And so they come to Shabazz and, you're absent, 50% of the time, really not teaching. And just imagine if you're a ninth grader and you only have five teachers, two of those in core subjects are two of those teachers, right? That was the
Yeah.
experience that I walked into. And that was very alarming to me because these children looked like me, the staff looked like me, but here we are in control of the school, and we are making decisions like that as a district, where instead of making the tough decision to remove this teacher and doing the paperwork, we were just shipping them around. And the least of the kids that needed the most were given that. And that was the system that I was in when I kind of entered. And that wasn't the entire system, but that was my kind of purview of looking at Newark Public Schools from the lens of Shabazz. I can't speak about if I was in magnet school and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. And it's unfortunate that, again, you have to have those experiences, and at the same time, I think that there's blessings from it as well, because that for that to be your motivation, it led you to BRIC. And so tell
Yeah.
everybody, does BRIC stand for something? What does BRIC stand for?
BRIC stands for Building Responsible, Intelligent, Creative Kids. And
I
that was
love.
created. This is actually our 15th year anniversary, Jay. So we are 15
Wow.
years old. So I guess we're teenagers now.
Yeah, yeah, teenagers, and oh, 15-year teenager. That's experience. That's an experience right there.
Yeah,
Me raising one myself right now. I understand that very well.
I feel for you.
And so you started at 25. You and your colleagues took over a failing school and created Brick. What was
Yes.
going through your mind at that time?
Yeah, so I taught at Shabazz for 4 years, and as I mentioned, I was in a position to kind of live out a passion. And I just wasn't passionate about waking up and going to work and unfortunately seeing the experience that we were providing children at Shabazz. And I was a participant in that, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. At the same time, there was charter schools in Newark were not that large, but they had started to prop up. And
Mhm.
I have nothing against charter schools per se because I have charter schools now. I manage them, but there is a reality that sometimes the children who need the most support unfortunately don't have advocates in their lives to enter into a lottery, which was in the
Mhm.
state of Jersey. That's the only way you can enter into a lottery.
Mhm.
So we approached the district with this kind of concept, which was, hey, let us kind of transform one of your chronically underperforming schools to provide a better experience for children. And we wanted to focus on K-8. And that was
Mhm.
just through a lot of prayer, a lot of conversations with myself about what's the next stage. And that was kind of what landed on my spirit was let's do something internal in the district. So Dr. Janey was the superintendent at the time. So he has passed away and gone up with our ancestors. Dan
Mhm.
Goh was the chief innovation officer. And Sadea White was, I think she was a chief, she was number two in charge.
Mhm.
So we got together after I recruited like five of my peers at Teacher America. Went and made a presentation, and I guess Dr. Janey was like, "I guess it can't get any worse," and so he gave us young whippersnappers the opportunity to transform one of the underperforming schools here in Newark, which was Avon Avenue School.
All right, that's awesome. And so from that experience, and I love the fact that you were so creative in doing that and going to the district and saying, hey, like I don't want to go
Yeah,
outside of the system, as you say,
yeah,
right? Um, and I think that is just again, I love you so much, and it's so admirable because I know you always lead with your heart, and you've just done such an incredible job. Um, what could what could Brick teach traditional schools in that same capacity? Like, what have you learned that if you had to share that knowledge, and I'm sure you have shared that knowledge with like a district, especially one that you came from, like what could they do differently from the aspect that you've seen so far?
yeah. Working in the district for 8 years and having good results, right? They weren't exceptional like we were, the top rated school in the state, but we were able to transform two underperforming schools and move them in the right direction. And now being in charter and running a high performing charter, I've just come, and with age, to be honest with you, and I've just come to understand that it is a structural system that is in place that is preventing our districts from achieving. And I don't want
Mhm.
to negate the fact that there are bad individuals, but there's bad individuals in charter schools and district schools and private schools that are not making the best interest of our children. Um, it is a system that we have designed, politicians, labor law, you name it, that creates these ecosystems around districts that just prevent them from being successful. And so I'm not in this bandwagon of just blaming every single district official and superintendents and teachers like that because I just don't. I don't think that's the root of the problem. I think the root of the problem is that we have structural elements that say, for example, you have to, if you do layoffs, you have to let go of the teacher who were just hired and not the underperforming teacher who's been here for 10 years, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
we create barriers that say you can't move this child through special education this way because we just have to check a box instead of saying, what do we holistically need to do for this child?
Mhm.
We have to do every school has to basically end at 8 and end at 3 because the labor contract says that, right? Instead of saying this
Yeah.
community might need to start at 9, this community might need to start at 7, how do we just do collective load? So I think there are structural things. And so my advice to politicians, to people who make laws and policies and to our labor laws and all that. Is that how do we release the district to be creative and innovative to meet the individual needs of children in their district? And that cannot
Mhm.
look one way. And that is what I will always push for, is allowing for districts to have that flexibility and creativity around that. Mhm.
Well, and you know what? And that's what we push for here at Freedom to Choose Schools.
Yeah,
It's
I
actually
know.
one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why we decided to rebrand our name, because for exactly what you just named, there is no one type of educational
Nope,
system. When you
not one.
have children, when you've worked with children, you realize that all options should be on the table for all of the variety of reasons that you just named.
Yep.
You also created an organization called the South Ward Children's Alliance.
Yes.
Why are wraparound services so important?
Yeah. So I have to take you on the journey on this one, Jay.
All
So
right, I'm ready.
5 years in, right? Maybe this is year 4. Year 4, we're starting to see some results, but we're also starting to see some troubling data. And one of those data points was we were classifying black boys in the school I run as a black male behavioral disorder at a higher rate than pretty much the entire district. We were just labeling them, right? Because we were structuring our school in a way that was not meeting their needs. It was at that point in time that you have to put the mirror up to yourself and reflect and like, yo, this ain't right. Like, why am I doing this? And I'm the leader of all this. Like, this is unacceptable. And there was other situations that just kind of continued to seep into the schoolhouse doors. And it was through that those decisions that we were making, through those aha moments, and really being proximate to the people that we were serving, that I knew our model had to evolve from what it was, which was a simple theory of change of placing a great principal and a great teacher, and miraculously that was going to end generational poverty. Of course, that
Mhm.
was not going to end generational poverty. So
Uh-huh.
create pathways to prosperity for all of our children, right? And so that is when our model evolved to what does it take for us to create an ecosystem in a two-generation format to support children holistically along with their parents? And how do we look at those social determinants of health? So that was the creation of the Southward Children's Alliance, which was the school needs to be an excellent quality school. And I never want to get into a argument of, oh, if we provide a dentist appointment, that's going to miraculously make the kid read, and if you only need to focus on reading. It's a both and for me, and I really hate when people go into these. It's either or. It's a both and. We have to teach and have quality teaching to hold teachers accountable in the classroom. At the same time, we need to create an ecosystem atmosphere that allows for families to be successful. So that is kind of how we have landed. So now, 15 years in, we have a full-fledged ecosystem, quality schools, access to healthcare, access to housing, access to workforce development, and access to navigation to support the family holistically, from pre-cradle all the way up to college and career. So it's been 15 years journey around that.
And I'm gonna tell you, I mean, 15 years may seem like a long time, but it's really not. So
Yes.
you've been able to,
Goes
yeah. I mean,
by
just think, I'm like, I feel like that's just like you ain't even close to retirement yet. I'm 15 years,
fast.
which is remarkable. And it's one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on our show, because here we are watching a black male teacher who literally led from his own passion come into the classroom, see some disparities that he couldn't quite change in his original structure, but
Yep.
definitely felt the way to, wanting to change it. Coming from a background environment of like basically a tale of two cities about how you even started this work. And then within a 15-year period, transformed from being a teacher to a full-fledged CEO running a network of schools, not only in New Jersey, but also in New York, correct?
That is correct. We are now in Buffalo, and hopefully everything goes well. We'll be launching in Rochester in the fall.
All right, well, that's good. And so I have to ask you because I think when we look at the teaching profession as a whole, one of the things that we're trying to do at Freedom to Choose Schools is really inspire teacher diversity. And you are like the beacon of what that could look like for so many reasons. Studies have shown that when students have a teacher administrator that they can see that they mirror them, they have a better academic success rate. Things like behavioral issues are lessened. Punishment and all that stuff is also looked at differently. And at the same time, our teaching profession has a lack of Black male teachers specifically.
Mm,
Um, how do you, or what could you suggest in the sense of like giving a young aspiring male teacher, Black male teacher right now who's like, I would love to go back to my community and teach, but they
ah,
just, it just ain't it for me. Like, what would you tell them?
Sometimes that question kind of throws me off guard, right? Because if they want to go back, but we haven't created this structure for them to go back, then how do we push them to do that? And what I mean by that is, right, because of our nation's past, many of us are still first generation to go to college, right? First generation, that means to build some wealth in our country for our individual selves, right? So it is hard to convince a teacher to go back and only make $40,000 because they want to have this heart-filled moment, right? And
Hmm.
so,
Especially when they have like student debt
yeah,
to
student
even
debt,
go to school. Right.
and
Hmm.
student debt, obligations. She might have, family obligations, right? So there's a
Yep.
whole lot that goes into that. So for me, it is, of course, if someone has that passion, I want to encourage them to do that passion, but I also don't want them to understand you need to do what's best for your own self. And if that allows for you to come into teaching, great. If not, don't feel pressured that this is something you have to do, because we need people on both sides to, push on that. So I always get thrown off by that because we focus on the individual and not the system that is preventing people from
Mhm.
making that decision. And so the more that we can not focus on the individual and more on the system, that will allow for us to get to the point that we want.
No, I mean, that is great. That is it. That in itself is a nutshell. You're
I
right.
know it's not probably what you want to hear, but I'm just like,
No, no, actually, it's exactly. Hey, look, I already know it's not what I want to hear. It's what other people want to hear, and you're right. And I think again, like that was a lot said in a short period of time, which is basically like, don't put the pressure on us to have some
but
obligation to go back into our communities
yeah,
and teach when the system we're trying to go back into ultimately is not even supporting that theory in a way that allows us to be successful, right? And so, yeah, 100% agree with you there and love the way that you name that. And again, this is like from the horse's mouth to people who need to hear this because there are people who are like, well, I'm going to go back and do that. At the same time,
yeah,
I'm like $50,000 in debt, so I'm gonna be upside down. It's like
yeah,
that
upside
doesn't
down.
make any sense to anybody, right? Yeah, and you're right. That is a system problem. That hopefully through some of our policy work at Freedom to Choose Schools, we'll be able to change that as well. Definitely something that we are passionate about and focused on, and expect to do more with. So let's pivot a little bit into national work, and you mentioned some of the politics, and I think you are just the premier. I know you don't want me to call you a politician, but diplomatically, you know how to work these angles real well. It is like really just pleasant to watch. So, Freedom to Choose Schools recently did a polling of Black and Latino voters. And
Yep.
we found from our Black voters specifically, 81% basically are concerned about Black history being erased from our classrooms. Um,
Mm,
as you've been doing your work in primarily urban communities with a lot of students and teachers of color, like um, how do you implement culture or identity into that work, especially because you have so much others to focus on, right? And as you continue to elevate, that socioeconomic is probably more of an issue than kind of the racial issues we have. But just
yeah.
curious to know, how do you deal with like the culturally affirming teaching that needs to happen to some of our specifically Black boys and Black girls in our classrooms?
Yeah, for us at Brick, we firmly believe that if you don't know who you are, and if you don't know how the world's going to interact with you, then it's going to be hard for you to maneuver through and have upward mobility. And
Mhm.
so we start from the point of our prenatal program having conversations with families around identity. And that looks different as you progress through our pipeline all the way up to college and career. But the core of it boils down to those three things, which is how are we designing our curriculum, the way that we interact, but allowing for people to understand who they are, all of their identity markers. Then the second layer to that is how is the world interacting with your identity markers? And then the
Yeah.
third part of that is now that you know who you are, your markers, and how the world's going to interact with you regarding your markers, now, how are you going to go into the world and make it a better place, and also not let some of those trials and tribulations that come from your identity marker sideline you? um, and
Mhm.
that and that is embedded into our curriculum. That's embedded into our outreach work. That's embedded into the way that we make decisions in terms of capital deployment. But we firmly believe in that as an organization. And of course, because most of our population is African American, and one of those identity markers that we do double down on is at being African American in America. But we also all your other identity markers, being a woman,
Yeah.
being a faith driven person, being gay, right? It's like all of who you are needs to be explored because
Mhm.
2 plus 2 is great. I can teach you that. But if you go to college and all you know is 2 plus 2, and that first time someone basically says something based upon the outward view of your identity marker,
Mhm.
like you don't know how to handle that, I believe that's a worse situation than you not knowing 2 plus 2.
Man, like, so we only have like 15 minutes left, and I'm like, man, we're just starting to get good. But no, that is such a good point, Dominique,
Yeah.
because you just named so much, and I think about it in the sense we're going to have a couple of podcasts where we're actually going to talk with parents who have sent their children to private schools and
Mm-hmm.
ask them questions about like what are some of the trade-offs when you have a child that is
Real. I
one of only, only
love
one
that.
in a
Right.
sea, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw, recently, all this stuff that's has happened with Mr. Kirk, I believe is his last name. Charlie Kirk, right? Is his last name?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know who he was until
Yeah,
unfortunately he passed. Right.
same here.
Hmm.
And definitely never want to sign on to anyone killing mourn his life and all that stuff with his family because that for me life is so precious no matter who you are. But I
Hmm.
saw a clip of a situation in which three kids were going in front of the school board, two white, one black in the suburbs.
Hmm.
And the black boy was in the center. And he was writing a speech saying that we need to have a day to honor Mr. Kirk and all the good things that he did for our society. And my head, like, mourned his life, yes, but unfortunately, he kind of lived a life of hate. And you,
Hmm.
young man, as African American, I don't think you were part of his vision of a whole. Everyone was free. I'm just like,
Yeah.
who is supporting this black boy in this community? Why? It was just
Yeah.
odd.
Yeah. No, it's it's so unfortunate, right? Because again, like I still feel like one of the things I constantly say about the work that we are doing and people that I work with, including people like you, there is a radical middle of these conversations that we're having that we
Yeah,
oftentimes do not
no,
focus on, do not
yeah,
hear from. And like you said, it's like both polarizing sides. It's like you either in or you're out. You got to be all the way over here to the right or all the way over here to the left. And I'm
right,
gonna tell you, in both cases, that is not good. In
no,
fact, in our
no,
polling, we talked about that too. That no one, we do not want political interference in our classroom. The culture wars that we're seeing happen, they need to
yeah,
stop at the door. They do not need to come in the classroom. But also to your point about like what are we doing as a society to educate our kids and and just diminish this idea of the polarizing opposites are only the only voices in the room.
no, I agree with you. I mean, Jay, I'm a person of faith, and one of the fundamental elements of the Bible that I believe is everything needs to be in balance. And when things are not in balance, you get chaos.
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
see that now. To your point, it's just like you're either in or you're out. And people like myself who identify, I'm kind of in the middle. Like I'm just looking
Mhm.
for what's the best policy of people. I can go left, I can go right. It's just like
Yep.
what is if I'm proximate to the person I'm serving, how do I use my leverage or my privilege to create a better society? And
Hmm.
sometimes that's right, sometimes that's left, and
Right.
we move on from there. But it is hard being in the middle nowadays because our social networks push you into the left or right. Everyone has an opinion. I call this the opinion generation. Every time you turn around, someone has an opinion. I'm just like,
Yeah.
well,
Right.
just shut up.
Yeah.
You don't have your opinion on this. Just shh. Right?
Right.
But
Right.
we're in very interesting times around this.
Yeah. No, we are, and I think we need to the radical middle, and by way of my own passion and motivation, has to speak a little bit more upfront and loudly because, like you said, there is just like we can go left or we can go right. How
Yeah.
about we go center? How about that? How about we get back to balance, right? and,
Yeah.
and and get back to balance. Let's make sure, like you mentioned, like not
Yeah.
only that kids are able to read on grade level, but we understand the value of the housing that is needed to make sure that kid
Yes.
feels safe. You know what I mean? The food that's needed to make sure that kid can show
Yep.
up present. I mean, everything that you're doing within Brick is a true just beacon of what education should look like and how you use community as well. Because oftentimes, um, I'm one that never likes to hear the word no or never looks at limitations. I'm always trying to look around the limitations. And so you'll hear
Yep.
people say, "Oh, we can't do that because X, Y, and Z." And it's like, well, what if you could? You know what I
What if
mean?
you could? What
And
if you
what if you
could?
could? What if you
Yeah.
could? What would that look like, right?
Let's just
And
let's just
and
let's just try.
let's just
What's the
try.
worst that can
Right.
happen?
What's the worst that can happen? Because we already know what this looks like. So let's
Right.
try something else and see what we can create. And Dominique, it's just been such a joy to just know you for as long as I've known you, and just to see you just grow. Like I said, you're only a teenager right now. Brick is in their adolescence right now, which is amazing because that means there's so much more growth that I can see happening with you. And who knows, 15 years from now, maybe we'll see you, as department, secretary of education, just giving us a whole understanding. You're like, no, I'm not doing that.
People can't handle a middle person like me who speaks the truth. I'm just
No, I
I'm not.
disagree.
I'm
Listen, I disagree. I have been pushed to be present. I've always been someone behind the scenes and next to the person, advising the person, and I'm pushing myself in this and what we're doing because I just really think that more people need to see people like us. The whole purpose of this podcast is for people to see and hear the radical middle, to see and hear that there are tremendous amounts of good work happening, especially in education across this country that often get ignored or not valued, and the impact of it is tremendous and still really not even hit its pinnacle yet. And so I see that in the work that you do, and really so excited that you took the time. We're about to close out. I did have one question. It's one question
Yep.
that we ask all of our guests, and the name of our show is Choice Words, and it has, like a double meaning. One, choice because we're talking about the choices that you have in school options, but also
Mhm.
choice words and like I got to tell you something. You know what I mean? Like let me tell you something. And so if you had to tell somebody something,
Okay.
either, what is your choice word that you'd want people to know?
In the current context of where we are as a nation, what I want people to know is that we are more similar than we're different. We are all in this together. And at the end of the day, we have to kind of look and see where our resources are going as a nation and really investigate if all the resources are going towards a certain group of people, maybe they're putting us against each other to keep those resources. And if we are able to align with each other, maybe we can have a different society where we all can flourish and just not a couple of, just not even a couple, just 1% of our nation flourish. The other 99% could flourish too if we all just
Mhm.
start to investigate and understand that we're all linked together. That's what I would say right now in our current context.
I love that. Choice words. We are all linked together and we need to dig, just scratch a little bit below the surface to really see
just,
what's really
just,
happening.
just a little. We don't have to go that deep. We can just go a little and see, like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a certain group of people. We're just hoarding all the resources. Maybe we should change that.
Yeah. And listen, from a faith-based person to another faith-based person, I am a true believer that all will happen in good time and that
Yes,
God has the last word. And
yes.
but we do
Our
have to stay diligent.
our
What you say?
ancestors went through our ancestors went through worse. You right? So that's what we have to continue to remind ourselves. They have gone through more trials and
Right.
tribulations than what we have.
Right. And also to that point, and they went through it so we didn't have to, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so that's such a that's one thing I honestly, with raising three children, I constantly have to remind them, like, it's not just about you just showing up to school. It is about,
Mhm.
the honor that you need
Yep.
to do and need to have when you show up to school because of
Yep.
how your ancestors paved this way for you. So,
Yeah.
it looks different when you come at it from that perspective. But like you said, a lot of that is based into being able to have the love, the housing, the support, all of that, that basically elevates and uplifts our children. And often sometimes we have a little bit of lack of that in different places.
Mm.
Dominique, this has been so great. Thank you so much for taking the time. Brick Network is in the Northeast region right now, soon to come nationally across the country if J. Artis Wright has anything to do with it. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for just all that you do, your leadership, and the work that Brick is doing for our students.
Thank you so much. I definitely appreciate the opportunity, Jay.